We're glad to have everybody here, as Catherine mentioned. Hey, by the way, why don't we give Catherine a round of applause for starting us off, kicking us off, as well as the marketing team. I don't think we thank them. I don't think we applauded for them. So for the marketing team, Remy, Courtney, thank you all. Welcome. We got a ton of different languages up here, basically just to welcome you here at our second annual user conference. Really, the reason is because I think we should be inclusive. We should be open to all the different ways in which you can say welcome. We should be open to new ideas. We should be open to hack innovation. But before we get into how crazy things happen and how crazy things change, I'd like to do a small recap of last year for 2017. So 2017, we had a little bit different title and theme going, but we did the same thing. We welcomed everyone here. As we welcomed them, we talked about connecting, learning, and leading. And as we did that, we followed that up with the Internet of Things, about technological augmentation, the pace of technology changing, and we'll cover that a little bit more today as well. We talked about a round to it, and so those of you who were here last year, I hope you don't have your round to it anymore. I hope you gave those away to someone who was telling you, oh, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I hope you gave them your round to it and then asked them to do whatever it was that they were supposed to do. We talked about the labor shortages been impacting this industry for the last several years, and I told you a little bit about a high school down in Donna, Texas, that was graduating RNs and LVNs, and how we needed to change the industry and start looking at those kinds of things. And I had someone walk up and tell me, hey, there's a school down in San Antonio already doing this. We have a school in San Antonio, Construction Careers Academy, that has a 4-year program that's teaching carpentry, HVAC, electricians, plumbers. And I would tell you that Audrey's going to give you guys a fantastic overview of their program, and you should pay attention, because if you get in on this and you start looking at what they're doing, one thing that her school is looking for is internships for her kids. So if you'd like to get access to what will be the next set of professionals that serve this industry, start out with internships. Build those relationships while those kids are now. She'll talk about it in her speech, I'm sure. But she is one of the only organizations that actually has an exemption from OSHA. Her kids go through an OSHA program, so you can put them to work on a job site while they're 16 years old. I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the country that is doing that. So she's looking for internships. I hope y'all will lend her your ear and you will support her. We also heard from General Vinnie Bowles, and if you didn't hear that speech or read his book, you really missed out, because he was an amazing guy, and he talked about what happens when supply chains go wrong. You make a decision, we're going to do these things, and we're all working together and get the end product, and you still have the same thing you always did. And so he talked about how many issues there are with respect to making supply chains work. And then at the end of all that, we had a fantastic party, and we're going to repeat that again this year. We're going to have a fantastic party, and we went from collaborate and innovate, accelerate out of the Connect, Learn, Lead. So if you're sitting in this room today and you're here, you're successful. So I would tell you congratulations. You've made it to the top. You are where you wanted to be. All those decisions that you've spent, all the spreadsheet hours, all those crazy things that happened, it worked out for you. Right? You're sitting in a room, you're having success, your business is doing well, we're in unprecedented growth with respect to our economy. So I hope this feels good. I hope where you're at right now feels good. Now, I also hope that you feel something else. I hope that in spite of that really good feeling, you also have that kind of little pit in your stomach feeling. That feeling, you know, when you're watching a scary movie and the heroine or the hero gets away, and you're like, oh, it's finally over. It's just great, safe. You look at your watch like, oh my God, it's only 30 minutes. This is a 2-hour movie. You know there's something else coming. So I hope you guys also feel that eeriness that's out there. And the reason that I want you to feel that is because there's always someone else out there. There's always someone else out there trying to produce a hack to what you do well. Someone who's trying to redefine the problem, to break the rules that we've all set up to play the game that we're in. So I hope you'll keep that in mind. The reason I want you to keep that in mind is because what got you here, what got you in this spot today, is probably not going to get you there. So where you want to go is probably going to take a different set of rules. It's probably going to take a different set of activities. So I hope you look at that, and I hope you continue to challenge yourself, because some of the largest companies that exist today that have the largest market caps weren't around 20 years ago. You know, Zynga, Uber, Airbnb, Facebook, the FANG stocks. There's a lot of these companies that weren't around 20 years ago, right? They don't have 100 years of history where they've been doing things. What they do have in common is they hack, they change, they evolve very, very quickly. Some would say they have revolutions internally, not evolutions, right? And so it's interesting to look at those companies and go, okay, well, what makes a company successful? Why do people experience success? And there's a few things that go into that. And reading a book a few months ago, one author said, hey, it's passion, innovation, and drive, right? So it's the passion to go after something with all your heart, in spite of everyone who says, it's never going to work. That will never work. You can't do it that way. No one else is doing it that way. You're going off the deep end. There's no way that'll work. It's the innovation to have that spark to say, I think there's a better way. I think because of how technology has evolved, I can take something and do it differently. I think that there is some new nugget. There's a new way to use information. There's a new way to find out and redefine the problem to say, hey, getting people from point A and point B isn't about having medallions and yellow taxi cabs everywhere. It's about someone having a car and an empty seat and going somewhere near that you need to go, and then someone getting remunerated for that transaction, right? So there are redefinitions to the problems all the time. And so when you redefine the problem, you change the rules. Well, we set up things to benefit us, right? To go through our capabilities, but it's this innovation, this hack innovation that leads people to go, why don't I just change the definition of the problem? And then it's the drive to turn an idea into an action. It's the drive to go out and change the way people do things, to do it differently, to provide that innovation, that spark, and someone go, you know what? I don't really care that I don't know this guy and he's driving his own personal car. I didn't know the guy who was driving the taxi, right? So there's not a big difference. But, you know, I think even in our industry, we see changes, right? HERS rating. How many people are doing HERS ratings within the industry, right? That's not free. That costs money, right? So change sometimes costs money. Adoption, being a leader in that, sometimes you feel it, but you're hoping that the rewards pay off, right? You're not building the same way you used to. You're changing your building envelope. You're changing the enclosure. You're changing how much air moves back and forth. The point is that you are recognizing a shift in demand. You're recognizing a shift in regulation of how we should use our energy and how we should store our energy. So if all these things brought you to this point, these are some of the attributes that helped you be successful. Some of the other attributes I would say that helped you be successful is that you took risks. You did things a little differently, and that's what got you to be successful. You made investments where other people did not make those same investments, and you recognized change. You adopted change, which is sometimes scary. And in our infancy, as we are small businesses, we typically do what the customer wants. One of Hyphen's mantras has always been a customer focus. And if we maintain a customer focus, everything else will take care of itself, right? But a lot of people get to some size and like, oh my gosh, this made us successful. This is what we did. We're doing this. And that's how you become, or you turn from, I'm a customer focused company to, well, we're the leading scheduling engine, right? And we change the definition, and now we just start to define ourselves as scheduling, as opposed to, no, our job is to meet our customers' needs and to do that well and to change when they need change, right? Because it's easy to define yourself as, oh, I got successful being scheduling. I'm going to be scheduling. I'm going to change a little bit and change a little bit and change, and someone else is going to come eat our lunch, right? So we're not about scheduling. We're about meeting our customers' needs. We're about connecting builders with their entire supply chain, whether that is internal or external to their organization. But it takes risk, it takes innovation, it takes change, right? And again, once you get someplace and you establish a competitive advantage, the last thing you want to do is change stuff. It's like, oh, well, we've got integrations and we do these things, and so why open your network? Because we need to change. And if I don't do it, someone else will, right? Because there's 3 smart guys that were in a dorm room and created Facebook. There's other folks that were doing other things, and now they get these multi-billion-dollar companies, and so everybody else who had markets then ultimately lost them. And that's what's interesting about being right. The allure of being right, right? Everything in your fiber that told you to do what you did to get to where you are feels good. And so we want to continue to do that. Oh, well, we'll just make this small change. We'll just do this small little evolving. We'll do this small move, a small shift, as opposed to a revolutionary one because it's safer, takes less risk, takes less investment. It takes less effort to do that. But there's people elsewhere that are trying to move the entire industry. So beware of the allure of having been right for so long, for having been successful for so long, because there are a ton of companies that have been successful that were then disintermediated from a market that they owned, right? So none of us operates alone in a forest, right? We don't have a specific market with which we have a monopoly and there's no other players there. No, we all operate in a market, and in this market, there are other builders, there are other suppliers, there are other subcontractors, there are other building product manufacturers, right? And you look at them at a point in time and they're like this forest. Some of them are big behemoths of trees and just established boundaries and firm roots. And some of them you look at and you're like, well, those guys are just doing it wrong. But what if those guys are seedlings, right? What if you're looking at them at a point in time before their mass grab of land share, of market share, of this mass growth in revenue? What if your definition of what the market needs is different from what that seedling thinks it is? And you're going like, holy cow, like we could have crushed them, we could have changed, we had the market share, we had the brand name, we had the money, we had everything we needed to be successful, except we refused to change. We refused to believe that the hack that someone else was putting in place could actually be successful. We refused to see the change. And so I would challenge you to be looking for shifts, to be recognizing change, to be looking at technology and go, how would I apply that today? Right? Because you don't have to build the technology, you have to apply the technology. You have to find a different use for the technology, an innovative way to change. And so the good news is that there is an indicator of change. There is a way to spot it. It's fairly reliable. You can count on it day and night. The problem is it's hard to look at. It's hard to look at because it flies in the face of everything that made you successful. It flies in the face of everything at your core belief of what you do and how you redefine yourself to be a thing or a provider of something, when really what you are is you're meeting your customers' needs in the best way possible. And the best way possible should change over time as technology evolves. The best way possible should change. It should become more pervasive. It should become more immersive. It should become more actionable. So let me help you with recognizing the change. So if we went up the left side of this structure and followed it to the tip top of that point, it would stop growing, right? It would stop increasing. It would actually hit the pinnacle, its peak. That would be where it would stop. That's the inflection point. That's a point at which the organization would be no longer growing, but not shrinking either. From a mathematical perspective, for all the math quants in here, that would be where the function of growth, the second derivative of the function of growth, equals 0. Everybody on board? Sounds easy, right? Good. Fantastic. Well, it's at that point where the growth rate changes from positive to negative and the direction of the flow goes, and then we start going down and we start shrinking. So I would tell you, be looking at your business. Is your growth rate changing? Is the direction of your growth changing? If it is, you might be hitting an inflection point, right? Now, for those of you that are either from Australia or more positive, maybe your market was shrinking and then it grew. Inflection points go both ways, and they can happen at any time, but they're likely involving either some change in market forces or some change in your organization. Stagnant organizations don't experience this. So let's look at a precautionary story. Everybody think, is better better, or is different better, or is just convenience better? I've always thought better was better. So I'm a big fan of music. So if I told you guys when we hit the rewind button a little while and we say, hey, look, I'm going to deliver a music playing device, a music player, and it's going to play music. It's going to be low definition. Everybody heard of high definition? That's typically better. Hi-fi stereo, the stereophonic sound, that's typical. So if I tell you it's going to be low definition and you're going to love it, It's probably not the best sales pitch so far. So let's look at sound. Sound occurs naturally in the universe as a wave. It's analog. Everything's connected. And when it occurs in nature, and you put a bunch of notes together, it occurs as a series of waves, but everything's connected. And when you have that many sound waves happening, it's when we feel that the music is immersive. It's when people say, no, I really felt the music. You feel the vibrations. Because the music itself goes past your point of actually being able to hear it, but it's still moving the follicles and the hairs in your ear, right? So that's when the music becomes immersive. So I'm not doing that. I'm not going high def. I'm instead going to go, I've got to convert this to digital before I can actually have you experience it in a player. So I'm going to take samples of the music. And samples of the music are just how many times I'm going to reach out and grab a snippet of what that sound wave looks like and store it. So the more lines, the better. I'm not going to do a lot of lines here. That takes too much effort. The second piece that we call in sound is bit depth when we're converting it to digital. And that's how close to the actual sound am I getting when I take that music sample. So if I'm on that curve, then I'm getting an exact reproduction of the sound at that point in time, right? So closer I get to the curve, the better. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to try and get close. And after I add those two pieces together, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add lossy compression. Think of lossy compression as your spouse tells you to go to the grocery store and buy a dozen eggs. In Texas, you go to Tom Thumb or HEB and you buy a dozen eggs. You get home, you have 7 eggs. That's lossy compression. So that's what I'm going to do to your music on top of all these things. Now, none of that probably sounds good. What does sound good is to chase a more natural reproduction of the sound. And so I'm going to do 24-bit sound maybe. Maybe that's what the competitor's picking, 24-bit. So CD quality sound is 16-bit quality. I'm going to do 96 kilohertz, which is well beyond what we can hear, but it's still immersive in the ear. With 16 tracks, which means I'm going to lay down a track for each individual instrument. So it's going to be really thick. It's going to be amazing. And a 3-minute song is going to use almost 1 gigabyte of storage. So 2 songs will use 2 gigabytes of storage. Now that is better. When we're talking about the sound quality, one of them's like, ooh, and the other one's like, it's okay. And so in 2001, Apple releases the original iPod. They call it the iPod Classic now, but it was just called the iPod back then. 2 gigabytes. It held 1,000 songs. It held 20 plus hours of music. It stayed charged for days and fit in the palm of your hand. One of those did a lot better than the other one. Anyone know Neil Young, singer-songwriter? He produced the top one up there. It's called the Pono. Anyone ever seen a Pono in real life? I personally have only seen it on the internet, pictures of it. It was an astounding failure. Great music specs, the specs are still held today as what you would use for DAC recording. So really interesting thing, and I would tell you, produces a better sound. Now, technology continued to evolve. I would tell you that your iPhone can produce incredible music today. We probably all use it to run our players. But better doesn't always mean better. Sometimes redefining the problem, and in this case, making it convenient. You know, I walked around with the Walkman, the cassette type, and then the better one was when we had the CD, and when you jog, it would skip tracks, and so you had all kinds of issues. But sometimes better is redefining the problem and it not being a pure reproduction of sound in this case, but a distinct, better way to make your music travel, to make your music mobile. And so they redefined the problem and garnered incredible market share. And I tell you, Sony was probably not thrilled about that. Microsoft, anybody remember the Zune player? Great, I was a Microsoftie too. I thought that was going to win. It didn't win. It was a better answer. So I've got a quiz for you. If you got a phone, I ask you, don't Google the answer. Work with us. If you're using it to text and stuff like that, that's okay too. Just don't Google the answer. So I want to see who can come up with this answer. So as a company, I was founded in 1927 by Juan Trippe. You got it. Pan Am, thank you, Greg Groves. We have a winner. So Pan Am was founded in 1927. By the 1950s, large crowds would gather just to see planes take off and land. I mean, if you look at the old advertisements, do we have a prize for Greg up here as well? Awesome. People would get dressed up. It was a real deal to take an airplane. I mean, they were wearing suits and ties. Women were wearing dresses and heels. It was really amazing to see that kind of stuff. But they had a leader who was innovative, he was driven, and when he retired in 1968, that was their most profitable year ever. Congratulations, Greg. You can't win the second prize, by the way. I'm just. His computer reservation system was installed in 1964 and took up the entire fourth floor of the office building. That's a huge investment, right? That computer system is probably as powerful as your iPhone or your Android phone, your Samsung today. But it was that innovation and drive and stuff that led them to be successful. Now, there were a number of reasons for why they ultimately went down, but they ceased innovation, right? The oil crisis caused some issues for them. The Lockerbie crash caused some issues for them. But when they started, their pilots were different than most pilots. Their pilots, when the plane went down and they landed, they would navigate by stars at night. They would navigate by equipment during the day. But when they landed and they had engine trouble, they fixed the planes. To become a pilot, you had to become a mechanic first at Pan Am. That was innovative. I guarantee you right now there's no pilots on any of your planes working on the engine. It just is not happening. They were the first to use wide-body jumbo aircraft, right? And then they stopped innovating. So during the oil crisis, they had an opportunity to take on new jets, but they were so worried about debt that they didn't buy any new jets. All their competitors bought new jets. New jets were twice as aerodynamically efficient and fuel efficient. So when they were competing route to route, they could not match the prices and profitability that their competitors were doing. Kind of a shame. What did they do in response? They sold off their routes. Well, if how you make money is flying people from one spot to another and you sell your routes, you're going to stop making money. Right? That's what you do. But they stopped their innovation, they stopped their investment, and I get it, investment's hard, it's hard to change. They got there using these airplanes, they got there using these tactics, they just refused to change them as the technology changed. All right, we've got another one. Again, no Googling, Greg, you're out. Our secondary cautionary tale. Edwin Land founded this company in 1943. Polaroid. Very good. That's our second winner back there. Very good. So at Polaroid's peak, they employed 21,000 professionals. Their leader retired in the late 80s. The reason he created this company was because he would take pictures of his daughter, and she complained that it would take too long to see them. Like, oh, you remember buying a 36, congratulations, buying a 36 roll of film, 36 frames, and then going, oh my God, I either just hit stop and go develop the 6 pictures and I wasted the rest of the roll, or I keep taking pictures and it could be 3 months before you filled up a roll and it was expensive to develop pictures. So that's how he created Polaroid. That's what he did. Declared bankruptcy in 2001, and they themselves actually built the last product in 2006. What's interesting about that was he was known for instant photography. The name Polaroid was synonymous with saying, I'm going to take a Polaroid. It was kind of like saying, I'm going to Google something. If you Google something, it doesn't mean a thing, or it didn't used to, now it does, but it means I'm going to go search for some term and get an answer back. I'm going to take a Polaroid meant I'm going to get an instant picture. They refused to see the shift in the definition. To Polaroid, I'm going to take a photograph meant that it had to resolve itself on a physical piece of paper. Digital medium, they didn't think that was a photograph. Anyone who's ever taken a photograph on their iPhone or a selfie knows that you can immediately go like that, and you can see the picture instantly, which is a digital photograph. So I would just tell us, watch for the changing of definitions of the things that we know and love, those big boundaries that we put up that we call competitive advantage. They can change. Polaroid had a clear, distinct competitive advantage, and instant photography just refused to change. And they're not the only ones. I'm assuming everybody in this room has been to a Blockbuster at one point in their lives, right? Great. There's 2 left in America, I think someone told me. 2 left in America. Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix for almost nothing. Who in here subscribes to Netflix? Right? Talk about not seeing it, right? But Netflix changed their model, right? Netflix used to get a DVD and you would mail that back, or there was a box and you would take this thing in, right? So they changed their model and they continued to change, and they're streaming, and then they partnered with all the cable providers and they stream over your set-top box today, right? So they are continuing to change. I would bet that they will continue to change over the next several years. We'll see what happens when and if they have a leadership change. Anyone ever rode a Schwinn bicycle? Most of us, good. Yeah. Schwinn owned the market. After 97 years, they ultimately declared bankruptcy. What's interesting is that they worked directly with Gary Fisher. Gary Fisher, anybody know who that is? Perfect. All right, great. So Gary Fisher basically invented the mountain bike. So anyone who likes to go off-road trails, riding bikes, Gary Fisher did a lot of that. One of the leading proponents, California guy. He did it with old Schwinn bikes. He was basically taking the parts off of those, modifying them, and making new bicycles. And they had an opportunity to work directly with him and take the market. They chose a different route. They didn't see the change in demand of our structure of the market. British Airways, I'm assuming everybody knows British Airways. They just didn't think Richard Branson was going to do anything. It's like, we don't need another airline. We certainly don't need one with nice seats and the flight attendants are all happy and the captains come out and talk to you. Who wants that? No, we want you to come in and throw a drink at me and be mad and never press the flight attendant light because I'm inconveniencing you. That's what we want as a service, right? So Virgin Atlantic became one of the biggest providers with one of the best reputations. They came here to America as Virgin America, took a huge piece of market share from multiple providers, and ultimately sold out to Alaska, right? But still maintained great reputation, great service, continued to change the thing. If you ever heard the thing, if you're the 2% of Americans who've never seen a seatbelt, here's how it looks, and they would walk you through how to do your seatbelt, right? So they just made it fun. They brought these things. So I tell you, be careful, because your Netflix is out there someplace. Your Gary Fisher, your Richard Branson is probably out there, working night and day to change the answer. And so the other thing I would ask you then is, okay, we're talking about all this change, we're talking about hack innovation. Is change really changing faster? I mean, can you prove that beyond a shadow of doubt? Can you provide any evidence that change is happening faster? So we looked at the phone. So if you look at landlines, it took about 60 years for landlines to reach 70% penetration in the United States. Okay, 60 years, not too bad. Look at mobile phones. 15 years. Smartphones. This is an old graph. It only goes to 2011. But does anybody in here have a phone that's not a smartphone? Who's got the flip phone? Anybody? Not 1%. So we got 100% penetration of smartphone in this room. Congratulations. Y'all are all innovators. You're leaders. But so is change going faster? Like, this would lead you to believe that certain change is moving faster. Can we find other evidence for that? Oops, you know what? I'm going to go back just because I think this quote was really neat. So Ray Kurzweil stated that change is picking up, and that while historically it has doubled every decade, that he thinks over the next 100 years, we're going to see 20,000 years of progress. So he obviously believes change is happening faster. And so, you know, if you take 100 and you multiply it by 100, you get a big number. If you take 1,000 and multiply it by 1,000, you get an even bigger number. And that's what he's basically saying here, that the pace has increased. So when you multiply a bigger pace by a bigger pace, you get a bigger number, right? So let's look at other change. When we look at running water and stoves and automobiles, that doesn't look all that crazy, right? Those aren't necessarily like crazy growth rates. You get a couple of spurts, you know, where maybe home building was up, and so stoves went up more, dryers went up more over a certain period of time, and now they're everywhere. But what happens if you take this kind of chart and then you only look at more technological focusing things? Look at the rate of change on those. Look at the amplitude. Look at the sharp curves that these things have. So maybe change is changing. Maybe change is changing faster. This is the market that we live in. This chart goes through 2016, and it's not slowing down. Now, we can be a part of change, or we can say it's not going to happen, and we can be any one of a number of companies that don't exist anymore. I hope you take the alternative. So in seizing the opportunity, ignorance is going to play a key part. I know ignorance has a dirty connotation. People are like, oh, you're ignorant. Ignorance, okay. Ignorance is just being unaware of the facts. I'd rather be ignorant than dumb. Now, some people tell me I don't have to choose between the two. But if you're ignorant of the facts, it means you can seek to gain some knowledge and do that. See, because there's guys out there that just don't know that you've created a competitive advantage in your field. They don't know and they don't care that you are the best brand in the market. They don't know and they don't care that you have relationships with everyone in the room. They're out there to solve a different problem. Why? It's a different problem because they're redefining what the problem is, and they're hacking that. It's actually one of my first fights with my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend, was at a Christmas party. Her mother throws a Christmas party every year, and I went in, and there's doctors and lawyers, there's entrepreneurs, there's guys that own TV stations, there's all kinds of people. And so I asked her, I was like, oh my God, no, how'd you get a room like this? I mean, there's so many educated, successful people. It's the most amazing thing. And she looked at me and ran me one side and down the other. Like, what do you think? Just because we're from the Valley, we're stupid? Like, no. I'm saying I'm stupid. At the time, I was the least educated person in the room. I was still working on my undergraduate. And these people, I was like, I've never been in a room like this. It's not you that's stupid, it's me. I can't believe the people in this room. So I asked her dad about it the next day. And his answer was, we were just too stupid to know any different. He's like, we needed a doctor in the community, so someone became a doctor. We needed a lawyer, and it's a small community. We needed a lawyer in the community, so someone became a lawyer. We needed restaurants. We needed stores. We needed grocery stores. So someone just did those. We didn't know we couldn't do it. We didn't know there were rules and there was all these other things that were boundaries to us. And although we may have experienced challenges in creating these things, we just overcame them. Passion, innovation, drive. We just kept doing them in spite of people saying we couldn't or thinking we couldn't. There's the passion thing, right? So from a passion perspective, they just kept fighting. They wanted to live in the place that they were at, and so they fought to make that community what it was. I'll tell you right now, there's someone with a great idea that's looking at that and going, I'm going to disrupt what you guys do, and I'm going to disrupt what you guys do by redefining the problem. It's not going to be the same problem you're solving for. So when I look at that and think, okay, what about a new Polaroid? And you'll all recognize this one. But something that provides you instant photograph viewing, something that instantly lets you share photos with friends, something that also creates a community where people can have feedback, where you can, I was like, oh, I'm not a great photographer, but if I put a couple of filters on this picture doesn't look half bad, right? So if you do all these things, you can follow your updates and be notified when they load new things up there. Anybody recognize the logo? Instagram, everybody recognizes. So within like the first 24 hours of its launch as this platform, because it had a different kind of platform that it was solving for, they got 25,000 users. Within 2 years of its introduction, they sold to Facebook for $1 billion and then kept their team separate and are able to continue to do things. Why do they keep separate? Because they want to continue to manipulate. They want to continue to innovate. They want to continue to evolve, to change the problem, to create new stuff. And they've been copied in a number of ways, from Snapchat to other different things that try and provide the same kind of medium. They're just going to continue to move the ball. They don't want to die. So in looking at another one, another company was rejected by multiple VCs in the Valley. They sent out 15 requests for meetings. They got 8 rejections, and some people just completely ignored them after multiple tries. The early version of this app was a roommate finder. Hey, that's a good idea. Very good, Airbnb. I'm out of gifts. It was launched 3 different times, unsuccessfully. Passion, ignorant. They were too darn ignorant to know they were going to fail. And they kept trying. They changed from Roommate Finder when they found there was a website that already did that, roommates.com. So they said, oh, we got to find a new problem to solve. And they did, right? They got $600,000 in funding in 2009. By 2011, they were in 89 countries and received $112 million in funding. I think they're in the 20 billion, something like that. They just changed the problem. They redefined it. The problem is not, I need a 70,000 square foot structure with restaurants and all these other things in it. The problem was, I need to provide lodging for a person in some place that has lodging available. They just changed the problem. And so my question to you is, are you going to cannibalize your business, or are you going to let someone cannibalize it for you? Are you going to be an agent of change.